Steve Blake is a doctor of science specializing in nutritional biochemistry. He is director of nutritional neuroscience at the Maui Memory Clinic. He is lead advisor and author for the Macmillan Reference Gala Encyclopedia of Alternative Medicine. He's worked as faculty nutritional biochemist at Hawaii Pacific Neuroscience for years. He is a research scientist who finished a clinical study at the Hawaii Alzheimer's Disease Center that he designed and ran with a large team. He is research director at the Neuroscience Nutrition Foundation. He has presented grand rounds at John A. Burns School of Medicine at UH, Castle Medical Center at Hawaii Pacific Neuroscience, St. Francis Liliha, Honolulu, and at Boston University Medical Center. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks for the nice introduction. So have you ever wondered if we're eating the right thing? Is everybody eating the wrong thing, and that's why everyone's getting sick? This talk is in two parts. The first part is really fun. I'm going to show you lots of animals and compare humans with the other animals on the planet and help us all think about what's going to really happen if we don't eat the right things. What we'd like is perfect energy, perfect digestion, perfect disease resistance now that COVID has eased somewhat, perfect protein satisfaction. A lot of people use protein as an excuse to eat certain foods, and just all the nutrients we need, not too many of the ones we don't need too many of. In other words, what foods are humans adapted for? Well, how do you choose what you eat? I have written all of these books and many more. I know many speakers at The Real Truth have one book, but I have lots of books, and I'll be telling you a little bit about these books as we go along. My website is drsteveblake.com if you want to get any of these books. How do you choose your food? I think habit's probably the biggest reason that we choose food. Also taste, convenience, price, and we also are influenced by food advertising. Food advertising is the largest spender of billions of dollars a year to entice you to buy the foods most profitable for the food industry. I did this little pyramid here so you could see what we're being encouraged to eat. 20% of the money spent on food advertising is to get you to buy fast food. 19% to buy candy and gum. Another 18.5% to buy alcoholic beverages. Soft drinks, 14%. Now, snacks and nuts are only 8%, coffee, tea, and cocoa, 8%, and the USDA meat and dairy ads, 8%. If you can see the black line at the bottom, that's all the healthy food that's basically not advertised at all. You have to know about it. So that would be fruits, vegetables, grains, and beans. What are the natural foods for human beings? I know that some people say that they're carnivores. If I ask you in the audience, how many of you are carnivores? How many are omnivores? And how many are herbivores? Plant eaters, in other words. As you look down at this baby cow suckling from the mother cow, you might wonder what would happen if you pushed the calf aside and went upside down and tried to suckle on the cow. How natural is that? Are we genetically adapted to do that? Or is it only in factory farms with mechanical milkers and all the other atrocities that make this milk available? Is it really so natural as we think it is? This fruit net on our boat is loaded with foods that we consider very natural for humans. And that's what we eat, largely fruits, vegetables, and also some grains and beans and nuts and seeds. Now, if you look at this cute little alligator on the bottom, look at those legs. What do you think? Could he climb a tree to get fruit? Not very easily, could he? Those little legs, in fact, he's an amphibious animal who actually is more maneuverable in water than out of water. very good at catching fish and I dare say even swimmers in the water. So by looking at an animal, you can get an idea of what it's adapted to eat, almost like it's designed to eat something. There's a story about some students who found a strange animal by the road. It was friendly and looked hungry. They put it in their van and brought it to a zoologist's house. And they went inside and said, "We have an animal in the van. Can we bring it in? We think it's hungry and we don't know what to feed it." The zoologist said, "No, not necessary to bring the animal into the house. Just tell me a few things. Does it have giant carnivore teeth sticking down? Canines, in other words." And they said, "No, he doesn't." And he says, "Do they have retractable claws? In other words, are they sharp pointed and retractable?" By asking a few questions like this, the zoologist could determine the food that the animal would eat. And in a similar way, today, I'm going to take you through and help you to understand which foods humans are adapted to eat. That's the first half. The second half of the talk, I'll tell you what happens if humans eat foods they are not designed to eat. One thing you might look at is, can the animal catch a prey? This cute little bunny there, when we were kids, I think a lot of us tried to chase bunnies and cats and dogs. And what happened? We didn't catch them because they're faster than we are. However, carnivorous animals are faster than the animals. So you can think that perhaps speed has something to do with it. Of course, speed getting away from predators is another important thing too. So there's some mix on that one. And look at the teeth on this cute little rabbit. I think that we'd all agree that if this rabbit were to bite the side of a cow or a pig, it wouldn't get any further than I would in biting through the hide. However, this bear, having lost one canine, still has one left, and it's pretty impressive, isn't it? Bears are quite decidedly omnivorous. They can grab animals. The way the canines work is the bear will run along and dig that canine into the hide of an animal to stop it and perhaps also to kill it. He can hold on to the animal with that canine and pierce the hide or the feathers or the fur or whatever type of animal it is. Bears are also really quite fast, and they can move rather easily to get animals. This bear on the right side of your screen looks like all 4 feet are off the ground. Now, if he were chasing me, I'd want to have a mode of transportation faster than my feet. What about chimps? Can they climb to get fruit? Looks like they can. In fact, they look like they're very well adapted to climb trees and to get fruit. What about their teeth? I don't see the canine sticking down there to pierce the side of an animal's hide, but I do see lots of teeth for eating fruits and leaves, which is their principal food for chimpanzees. Cute little guy. Now we can look at the 4 categories of animals, well, 3 categories, and then see where humans fit in. Carnivores. This tiger is my example of a carnivore. It's a beautiful creature. Notice the camouflage, the swiveling ears, the gigantic canines. Now those are canines, even though the dog next to him has canines and canines are named after the word dog, the tiger really puts them to shame. Now check out the canines on the zebra. Having trouble finding them? They're not there. Zebra's teeth are principally flat for grinding up fruits and vegetables. And human teeth are principally flat too. We do have a tooth that's called a canine, but it's a little hard to tell even which one it is. I mentioned the long dagger canines in the carnivore. They also have scissor incisors. That means that they can actually slice meat off with their teeth. We have to say that humans can't do that. Also, omnivores have long dagger canines and pointed scissor incisors, so they can slice things off with their teeth. Humans, however, have neither. Our incisors are broad and flattened and spade-shaped. We simply don't have the teeth to grab animals, to rip open their hides, and to chew them up. A little more about teeth. See, we're playing a little bit of a detective story here. If carnivores have thin tooth enamel, they don't chew much. Omnivores have thin tooth enamel. They chew a little bit. They're able to eat some vegetables and fruits and other plant matter, but principally they eat animals. Humans, however, have a thick enamel on their teeth because, like other plant-based animals, we chew a lot. And if you watch a dog eat, you'll see it chews very little, a couple of chomps and it swallows. But humans, if you look at them, they chew quite a lot. The molars on carnivores and omnivores are jagged and square. With humans, they meet up, and with carnivores and omnivores, they don't meet up. In other words, the molars on a carnivore or a dog, they slice past each other like this. Now, try something in your own mouth. Try to get your molars to pass by each other. Can't do it. They meet. They're not designed for slicing meat off bones. They're designed for grinding up things. What about the size of them? If you were going to bite into the side of a cow or a pig, that mountain lion on the bottom left would have no trouble at all doing that. The wolf-looking Malamute above him also has a huge mouth opening. These animals can eat a large proportion of their meal, of their daily food in one meal. However, the cute gorilla can't open his mouth that wide, can he? And if he, just like the girl below, if either of them bit into an animal, they don't have the equipment to open their mouths wide enough or to actually bite and grab the animal. So are we getting a little bit convinced that humans might not really be carnivores or omnivores? Probably not yet for everyone. You see this dog in the middle eating a pizza. Imagine you put a pizza down like that in front of a dog. How long do you think it would take him to finish that plate? We've all seen dogs. What they do is basically they bite, chomp, chomp, tip their head up and swallow. And they swallow with very little chewing. Tigers and other carnivores swallow with very little chewing, but humans chew for a while. This little girl is going to take a bite and chew for a while and then swallow. Now, also, our jaws are designed to go side to side like this. However, the hinged joint on both the cat and the dog do not allow that. However, they're much more powerful, but they don't have the mobility to do side-to-side chewing necessary for grinding grains. By the way, in a natural environment, people can walk along and with the fingers just pull along a stalk of grain and put it in the mouth and chew it. And we have the perfect teeth for that. And we can catch those grains too because they're slow enough. Okay, now this picture is a classic example of, shall we save them or take a picture? They took a picture. Carnivore lips are different too. You ever notice the lips on a dog? They're very, very thin, or a cat? Very, very thin, almost tiny. However, human lips are mobile, muscular, and thick. And that helps us. Imagine you're biting into an orange or a mango or another fruit with a peel. The lips help you to get what you want and spit out the peel and the seeds. The carnivores, like this one who's about to eat this man, the temporalis muscle operates the jaw. The temporalis muscle is extremely powerful, but all the jaw can do is open and close. It doesn't go sideways and it doesn't go in and out. It just goes open and close. But if you've ever been bitten by a dog, you know that the temporalis muscle is extremely powerful, much more so than if you get bitten by a kid or another human. So it is interesting that we have different muscle groups operating our jaws. Humans have the masseter and the pterygoids to operate the jaw for fine-tuned control and some strength, but the omnivores and carnivores have much more powerful ability to chew and to bite as well. Okay, what about speed? Who thinks they can outrun this cheetah? Well, if the cheetah was hungry, even if the cheetah wasn't hungry, 62 miles an hour, while this extremely buff-looking track star on the right can go 24 miles per hour. I don't think I can quite hit that speed. Humans are not as fast as most prey. Bears can run about 30 miles per hour. That's why they're omnivores. They can only catch some animals and have to depend on berries and other things for the rest of their diet. But the cheetah is an amazing display of speed. Now, by the way, this is burst speed. The cheetah and the bear can run very quickly for a short period of time, but they don't run for long periods of time. Now, here's something that even some of the most people who think they're carnivores have trouble doing. This beautiful hunting dog is able to run while sniffing the ground simultaneously. And when I've challenged, I gave this talk at Suffolk University in Boston last fall, and I challenged any of the students to do that. And no one actually tried. It's just ridiculous. Humans can't do it. We're not designed to do it. We're not designed to track prey. Did you know a dog's smell can be up to 100,000 times better than a human? Omnivores such as bear can smell 100 times as well. But it's just amazing how much better these animals can track. People say, well, in Copper Canyon in Mexico, people can run down deer. Well, there is a particular canyon that has walls that are just too steep for the deer to climb out of. And it's a long, straight run. And it has been happened that someone actually ran down a deer in Copper Canyon. Of course, once they ran the deer down, what can they do? Bite it, get mauled by the horns, get stomped by the hooves, more likely. And even if they did somehow manage to knock it unconscious or kill it, how are they going to carry it back to put over a campfire? Because humans can't eat raw meat. The idea that we could catch animals is pretty ridiculous because this dog can follow an animal. If the animal were to climb up a steep, muddy slope where humans can't follow, this dog can go up after. If the animal ran into the bush and ran zigzag through the jungle, a human would lose sight of it. We don't have good enough smelling or hearing to track that animal, but the dog could easily track that animal. So I'm just saying we're not set up. Humans are not genetically adapted to catch animals. Now, cats, like this cute little kitten, have ears that swivel like radar dishes to track prey. They can move independently as well. Human ears, of course, cannot swivel, and they're not so sensitive. Plant-based animals depend more on sight, and sight's very important for determining the ripeness of fruit, especially. And carnivores use smell and hearing. As you know, dogs use principally smell. Another thing humans don't have is camouflage. Can you spot the cat in this picture? Well, this leopard is very well camouflaged, and you wouldn't want to walk under that branch if the leopard was hungry. But humans don't need camouflage. That's another difference between us and animals that hunt prey, carnivores. Another difference is that this cat on the top has a huge amount of fur on its chest. It's armored. So that if this cat were to pick up, let's say, a rooster, and the rooster would try and dig in his talons into the cat, it wouldn't hurt it at all. Or if the cat got a rat, the rat's claws and teeth wouldn't hurt it. But if the surfer boy below were to grab a hold of a rooster, his chest would get shredded because he's not designed or adapted to catch animals. Another difference is that you notice the cat in the picture on the top is kind of sitting down. Predators sit. Cats and dogs sit or move, whereas humans are able to stand up. This is two ways to measure calcium. Okay, the total calcium in the food and the effective calcium when you account for the reduction of available calcium from excess protein principally, and also sodium reduces your ability to really intake the calcium. So the first side is SAD diet. That's a standard American diet. And the amount of calcium was 1,290. but the protein is 149. That 100 grams reduces the effective calcium from 1290 to 685, barely enough to keep bones together. The Atkins diet, with 122 grams of protein versus a need of about 50, is actually negative 312 milligrams of calcium per day. We need at least 800, and they're getting negative 319. Too good. Not too good for bones. The paleo diet and the keto diet are very much touted by meat eaters as being somehow desirable. So the keto diet has a ridiculous protein of 235 per day. There are other disadvantages to having too much protein. The South Beach diet only got 295 effective calcium in a day. Now, a transition vegetarian diet with a lot of white flour, eggs, and cheesy stuff did get plenty of protein and plenty of calcium. The Mediterranean diet got enough calcium. A vegan whole food diet that I analyzed got 640 milligrams of calcium per day, a little bit low. And I do advise myself and others on a plant-based diet to get some extra calcium, either through food or supplements. And if it's supplements, please not the calcium carbonate form, which is so poorly assimilated. Now, a carefully chosen raw vegan diet was able to get 1,120 milligrams of calcium effectively. The protein quality is another myth that has been spread around really quite a lot. I have two diets here, one with 8 ounces of tuna and 4 ounces of beef on the left. On the right, we have 8 ounces of potatoes and 2 ounces of nuts. Now, the individual colored bars show the amino acids with the tuna and beef and the potatoes and nuts. Amino acid balance in real diets is always fine. High quality protein is always obtained in people who get enough protein. And to get enough protein, you basically need to eat enough calories to keep your weight up. It's difficult to design a diet where you wouldn't get enough protein. Humans and plant eaters are pretty striking. Carnivores have a short digestive tract to eliminate rapidly putrefying meat. The length is about 12 feet for a cat of human size. You can see by the picture that it's a very short, uncomplicated digestive tract. Omnivores also have a short digestive tract. This helps to eliminate foods devoid of fiber. Humans, however, need fiber in their diet like all plant eaters. And we have a long digestive tract to extract all the carbohydrates from starchy foods, length about 30 feet in humans. There are some other interesting differences in digestion. About 90% of people who choke to death choke on meat, and that's because we have a narrow, non-stretchy esophagus. When we swallow things, our esophagus doesn't get broad. You've seen dogs swallow big chunks of meat, and I'm amazed that they don't choke, but they don't, because their esophagus is stretchy. Also, it's real interesting that carnivores and omnivores, like dogs and bears, the stomach makes up 65% of their digestive capacity, whereas our stomach's only about a quarter of our digestive capacity. In other words, they can take in a lot more at one sitting than we can. And of course, as a predator, they need to do that. Predators can eat 1 time per day. A lot of people only feed their cats and dogs once per day. They like it more often, but that's enough. But humans eat many times per day. If you're familiar with children and how they like to eat, they pretty much like to eat frequently. 34 to 40% of body weight can be eaten by a carnivore in one meal. To compare that to a human, and I'll take volunteers for this meal, a 70-pound meal could consist of 566 hot dogs. Any volunteers from the audience? No, please don't. I don't know what the world's record is for eating hot dogs, but I have a feeling it's a lot less than 566. But the difference is here, are you getting the idea that our digestion is different than a carnivore or an omnivore digestion all the way through, including the stomach acid. Our stomach acid and vegetarian stomach acid, plant eaters, is about as acidic as lemon juice. whereas carnivore and omnivore stomach acid is about as acidic as battery acid, pH of 0.8 on the acid scale. Hydrochloric acid is 0.5. That's extremely strong. Roadkill is deadly for humans, but dogs and cats have powerful stomach acid to kill the germs. This is a big difference because if you imagine yourself to be some paleo hunter that actually manages to bonk some poor animal over the head and you manage to somehow chew your way through the hide, if you eat it raw, your stomach acid's not enough to kill the bacteria, and it's not enough to kill the parasites. And in fact, you're likely to die of food poisoning. So human digestion is not set up to eat meat. Of course, people have adapted to cook the meat. I'm going to talk about some problems with that a little later on. Life is different too. Carnivores and omnivores do not have the form of saliva that can pre-digest starches called alpha amylase talon. Humans and plant-eating animals have this amylase in their saliva, so we can pre-digest the starches. And the colon is quite different in humans and animals who eat no fiber. Cats and dogs don't need fiber, but humans need fiber. The RDA for fiber is only 20 grams per day, and it's really not enough for healthy digestion. I suggest a 40 gram per day minimum for healthy digestion amount of fiber per day. However, even better, an optimal amount might be more like 60 grams of fiber per day. And that would entail a whole food plant diet to get that much fiber. The human large intestine is sacculated. See those little bumps on it. And the intestine is designed to work with fiber. You really need a lot of fiber in there. The fiber is digested by our cohabiting bacteria and is turned into short-chain fatty acids such as butyric acid. Butyric acid is the main energy source for the cells lining the inside of the large intestine. If they get starved for energy, they get very mad. It causes pain and difficulty with digestion. That is extremely common in people who don't get enough fiber. However, the colons of the carnivores are the same size as the intestine. There's no large intestine there, and they're not sacculated at all. Okay, we covered digestion, I think, pretty well. I hope that I've convinced you that humans just aren't genetically adapted to digest things that aren't plants. Now, as far as butchering prey goes, in order to butcher prey, you would need to dig through the hide. Getting through chicken's feathers or rabbit's fur or cow's hide or pig's hide, whatever. It's going to be a tough call unless you have claws like the guy in the lower left there. But most people aren't born with claws like that, and they don't look too practical, actually. But the sharp retractable claws, along with the dagger-like canines, are hallmarks of animals who are genetically adapted to butchery. Right? Okay, that's the fun part. Now, what happens if we eat foods that we're not genetically adapted for, such as meat and cheese? Meat and cheese have a lot of saturated fat, and I made this kind of stoplight for how much we can take of these. So percent of calories of saturated fat, if it's 5% or less, then our LDL is typically under 70 or not much over, say under 100. And our total cholesterol, 150 or less, which is referred to as the safe zone, the heart attack proof zone. If, however, you're eating something like 7% of calories or less, there may be some arterial clogging starting. The LDL is likely to stay under 100 and the cholesterol under 180, which most doctors would say is fabulous because that's so much better than most people. Now, a Mediterranean diet has about 10% of its calories as saturated fat. Typically not an increase or a decrease in arterial clogging, certainly better than getting worse. LDL is over 100, total cholesterol usually 200 or more. But then you get to the typical American diet, over 15% of calories as saturated fat. we have seen this number all much higher. And his LDL was extremely high, as this red stop signal says, and total cholesterol really high. But what I'm saying here is it's under our control. You can adjust how prone you are to getting a heart attack. Compare saturated fat levels between an American diet with 15% of calories promoting high blood cholesterol and heart disease, or only 3.8% of calories on a whole food diet with protection from heart disease. The maximum safe amount, we usually describe it to people as the number of grams per day, because you can read the back of the package. If your maximum total for a day is 12 grams, and you read the back of a package of breakfast sausage and it says 24 grams per serving, then it's pretty likely you're not going to stay under 12 grams per day. You know what I mean? This book is the Diabetes Breakthrough, which I wrote because there's a misunderstanding about how people get diabetes and how to stop having diabetes. This is available only on my website, drsteveblake.com, there on your screen. I don't subscribe to Amazon for various reasons. A high dietary saturated fat creates insulin resistance. Insulin resistance means that, okay, you eat, let's say, 2 donuts, and your blood sugar spikes up really high. At that point, your pancreas, the beta cells, and the islets of Langerhans puts out insulin. The insulin travels through your body trying to put the blood sugar into the cells for energy and for storage, but not in the bloodstream where it's damaging. Too much sugar in the bloodstream, glucose technically, can damage the brain, the eyes, the kidneys, and the bloodstream. So we really need to get that sugar out of the bloodstream. Now, this diagram is from a paper that I wrote, and it shows insulin there, a little circle, and the insulin is going to lock onto an insulin receptor. The curved part is the cell membrane. The insulin receptor has an outside and an inside end. However, there are fewer insulin receptors if you eat too much saturated fat, about half as many. So already it's going to be tough to get that blood sugar out of the blood and into the cells. And then there's a problem that the saturated fat, through interesting and technical ways, managed to stop the insulin substrate receptor from locking onto the inside end of that insulin receptor. So nothing happens. The glucose stays in the bloodstream and damages things, and you don't have any energy because it's not going into your cell. Now, this sets up a little cascade. There's an arrow there. PI3K, which is phosphatidylinositol 3 kinase, is in a chain along with protein kinase B. Those two both need to be activated in order to activate GLUT4, the glucose transporter 4, so that glucose can enter the cell. You get a big chunk of glucose into the cell if that works. However, it doesn't work with too much saturated fat. So the real problem with diabetes is twofold, not onefold. One, you shouldn't eat so many fast-releasing carbohydrates. And two, if you keep your saturated fat intake under 12 grams per day, you can have a much easier time clearing that blood sugar out of your bloodstream so that your fasting blood sugar levels are lower. And over time, your HbA1c, your glycated hemoglobin, will also get much lower. So for more details, you can get this book. I make my books generally available for under $10 as ebook format on my website. Here's saturated fat in the different diet. Standard American diet with amazing 148 grams of fat had 14% saturated fat, very bad. Atkins diet is a record breaker at 23% saturated fat, the worst on this chart. The zone diet and the paleo diet had about 10, although variations of the paleo diet do have more than that. The keto diet definitely had the worst percent of fat and the amount of fat, and a very high 19% of calories of saturated fat. South Beach was a little better. transitioned vegetarian diet because of the large amount of cheese, got up to 15% saturated fat, not healthy. Mediterranean diet was 8, almost good enough. It varies between 8 and 10, and it can vary quite a bit depending on what people eat. Vegan whole food diet was a comfortable 4. The McDougall diet, where you're eating almost no fats or oils at all, was 2, and the raw vegan diet 6. Now, I have to say there is a downside to extremely low-fat diets. If you're only getting in 12 grams of fat in an entire day, that's not enough. People need 2 essential fatty acids. The McDougall diet and many other diets that are extremely low fat like that, they simply don't have enough of either the essential fatty acids or vitamin E, and they make it impossible to actually absorb carotenoids, those colorful pigments that are antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, so valuable that they can't be absorbed on such a low-fat diet. The raw vegan diet, of course, was fine on saturated fat, and it typically is because raw means whole food. Here's another book that I've written. It's called No More Heart Attack. Shows you how to lower your risk of a heart attack or a second heart attack. I am heartened, can I say, by friends of mine who've gotten heart attacks decades ago, followed the advice in this book, and are still here on this planet and not dead from another heart attack. Unfortunately, a lot of people get one heart attack and sometimes more, and sometimes they're fatal the first time. So would love it if you or a loved one needs this book, as I say, under $10 at drsteveblake.com. I hope that can help you lower your risk of heart disease. So what happens when people eat a diet that looks like that? I'm going to change this slide quickly. Are humans adapted to eat meat? What happens? If you eat red meat, it raises the risk of heart attack 2.5 times. Now, there is a small citation here to Clinical Nutrition Research 2019, a study. This was a case control study in an Iranian population, and they looked at people who ate more meat and less meat, and the ones who ate more had 2.5 times as much risk of heart attack. Notice they're not comparing these people to vegans. They're comparing the people who eat less meat. Another study in cancer research showed that colorectal cancer risk rose 300% with more red meat. Part of this is due to the nitrite added to the red meat to make it red instead of kind of roadkill gray. Hard to sell meat when it looks like roadkill gray. So they add nitrite to it. Nitrite can turn into cancer-causing nitrosamines, and this is one of the reasons that increases colorectal cancer risk. Increased risk of cancer death from 1 ounce per day of red meat was 29%, and 1 ounce of processed meat, 1 ounce, it's amazing. 1 ounce, 50% raise in risk. I think that most people who eat red meat typically eat 3 ounces at a serving, and sometimes more than once per day. If a person were to eat bacon for breakfast, ham sandwich for lunch, and a steak for dinner, they would be getting a lot more than 1 ounce of meat, and their chances would be a lot more than 50% raised cancer death. This is not incidence, this is death. Did you know tigers and bears do not get heart attacks? They are genetically adapted to eat meat, and humans are not. I mentioned my book, Diabetes Breakthrough. There it is again. Meat eating also doubles the risk of diabetes, and I explained a little bit why. Because you can't get the blood sugar out of your bloodstream when you're eating meat because of the excess saturated fats. Ulcerative colitis, 500% more likely with red meat in the well-known journal Gut. They looked at the influence of dietary factors on the clinical course of ulcerative colitis, and they found this 500% risk. Pretty gruesome. Just 2 servings of meat per week doubled kidney failure risk. Kidney failure is a really terrible problem in the older population and very difficult to deal with. Plant-based diets have been shown to be very helpful. But that's only 2 servings per week. And a lot of people eat more than. This is a book that I wrote on stroke. Having worked at neuroscience clinics for many years, I've seen the effects of strokes. And some strokes are light and cause very little disability. And some strokes are immediately deadly. And other strokes leave people in pretty bad shape with half of their body not working, difficulty speaking, sometimes difficulty thinking too, because a stroke, depending on where it hits in the brain, can involve the thinking areas too. Strokes, however, are not necessary. There are many ways to reduce the risk of a stroke. I wrote this book optimistically thinking that people would say, oh, strokes are bad. I'll take all these steps before I get a stroke. Only uses safe solutions. I use no unsafe solutions. There are no negative side effects to anything that I'm going to suggest in my book as helpful. And also, all of the information, as in all of my books, is referenced to good scientific peer-reviewed studies. What about dairy products? A lot of people think that humans should be drinking dairy all the time or eating cheese all the time. However, humans are not well adapted to dairy products. Higher dairy intake in an American Journal of Clinical Nutrition study more than doubled heart attack risk. In a circulation heart failure journal, heart failure risk is raised 62% with more cheese. And another study showed that reducing dairy fat just 5% cuts heart disease risk 24%. Wow, that's really a lot. Cheese is heavily involved in many of the chronic, terrible diseases that people get. And I would encourage you to think about, well, there's some cheese alternatives that are great. I'm going to tell them about cheese alternatives. My wife is an expert in how to eat really delicious food and knows a lot about the alternatives. You don't need to suffer these days. If you like milk, there's other milk that isn't from cows. If you like cheese, there's other cheese, ice cream, all of these things. So my wife's going to do a cameo here. This is Catherine Blake.
Hi there, I'm Catherine, and we work together as a team in the clinic. My specialty is telling people how to find alternatives to the foods that they've been used to eating their whole lives. So for alternative cheeses, I have several. I like Miyoko's, makes some really good cashew nut-based cheeses. Daya is delicious, not that hearty. I prefer to avoid the coconut oil-based cheeses because they're very high in saturated fat. Did you know that 1 tablespoon of coconut oil contains 12? It's 2 tablespoons is 24.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you. So if you have 1 tablespoon of coconut oil, you've had all the saturated fat you're allowed for the whole day. So you don't want to eat anything else all day, right? I know it's gotten real popular. People make coconut oil chocolates and things, but it's very high in saturated fat. So it contributes to the problems we're trying to avoid here, the heart disease and even diabetes.
Can you have
influenced. Ice cream, yes. We found some that are avocado based. In fact, I have a recipe that I'd like to give you. You take, if you're lucky enough to have ripe avocados, you collect a few extras and mash them up and put in equal parts of cacao powder and organic brown sugar and a little bit of vanilla and just a pinch of salt. You stir it all up, put it in the freezer, and it freezes, and it's creamy and delicious. And when you offer it to your friends and say chocolate ice cream, they don't even know that that's non-dairy. So they're excited about that. We also, there are so many alternative ice creams out there. There's soy-based, rice-based, cashew nut-based. So there are a lot of really delicious ice creams.
And butter?
And yes, there's excellent alternatives to butter as well. There's smart butter. And that's the one that we get only on occasion. What I have done is I've evolved to not even be interested in a lot of those foods anymore. Instead, I will choose to make a hummus dip or guacamole or a nut butter dressing. So I'm actually not needing the dairy the way that I used to when I grew up, where the dairy sauces. I have a great creamy walnut dressing.
But it's really great. Thank you, Kath. And the side effect is that you can cut your risk of heart disease 24% for each 5% of dairy fat that you reduce in your diet. It's amazing, isn't it? That's from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Dairy products also increase breast cancer risk 49%. That's big. Prostate mortality was raised 141% with dairy 3 times or more daily, which is common in America. Milk drinking in early life raises the risk of serious prostate cancer over 300%. In other words, humans are not adapted to eating dairy products, and it's better if you don't eat them. And as my wife said, there are plenty of great solutions out there. You start off switching from dairy butter to an alternative butter, like smart butter. And then after a while, as she mentioned, you can go on to more healthy things such as nut butters and guacamole and hummus and all kinds of good things. Children with dairy consumption have a 800% risk of constipation. Dairy products, milk, contains a substance called beta-casomorphin 7. And the caso refers to the casein protein. The morpho refers to the morphine-like opiate in the milk. This is why it's so hard to quit dairy, because it's really an addiction to an opiate-like substance. It is an opiate substance. If you've ever taken an opiate painkiller of any kind, you'll know that they stop your stomach from moving, instant constipation. But the dairy does it in a similar way, perhaps not as drastic, but it really increases constipation. And that's one of the problems with dairy products. Another problem with dairy products is Parkinson's disease, 80% higher risk with more cheese. And this is principally due to the organic pollutants that are bioaccumulated in the milk and then in the humans who drink the milk and eat the cheese. Cheese is, of course, more concentrated. My wife wrote this book, Healthy Recipes for Friends, and it's available on my website, drsteveblake.com. Also, as an ebook under $10, she does have paper versions too, if you prefer that for a little more. Healthy Recipes for Friends. I tested all the recipes very happily. Well, what about eggs? A lot of people seem to think that eggs are healthy, and the advertising seems to indicate that it is. This was a study by Spence et al. In Atherosclerosis, 2012. Atherosclerosis is a major peer-reviewed journal. More eggs increased heart attack risk similar to more cigarettes. Wow. A really stunning study where they showed how fast your risk of heart attack went up if you ate more eggs, similar to cigarettes. And just 1 egg a day was associated with a 500% increase in heart attack risk. That's from a 2021 study in the Journal of the American Heart Association, another peer-reviewed journal. So eggs increase your risk of heart disease. And one of the ways they do this is because they have a lot of cholesterol. I mean, a lot of cholesterol. And the cholesterol, when it's cooked, turns into oxysterols. Now, cholesterol can't traverse the blood-brain barrier, but the oxidized cholesterol, the oxysterols, do traverse the blood-brain barrier and go into the brain and damage it. They also damage the arteries. And this oxidized cholesterol is a real problem from eggs. Eggs are found to increase colorectal cancer risk 700%. Right there is enough to keep me away from eggs. Another study showed even 2 to 4 eggs per week, just weekend consumption, raises cardiovascular risk 43%. And then more eggs raise it more. 3% less eggs equals 24% less death. And they just studied death. Now, on screen here, you have something called Just Egg. And people have been very happy with Just Eggs. It comes in a bottle or in these little patties. And it doesn't have the cholesterol or oxysterols or any of the other bad things. And it's available. And a lot of people who like to eat eggs and switch to this are just as happy. Typical quote is, "I don't notice the difference." I very recently wrote an article, co-wrote with the lead author, William B. Grant, and I'm the senior author, Stephen M. Blake. And this is in the most prestigious journal, the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease. And this just came out last November. And it's called Diet's Role in Modifying Risk of Alzheimer's Disease, History and Present Understanding. If you'd like to not get Alzheimer's disease and lower your risk of this or for a loved one, we pretty much tell the story in great detail. Which foods, which mechanisms, how it works. It is open source. We paid extra so that you can get this. Now, this at the very moment has not been released by the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, but is available on preprint.org. The full article is available now if you want to get it. Just type in the title into Google or Google Scholar, and you should be able to find it probably very easily. Our main finding, the foods that increase risk the most of Alzheimer's disease, red meat and processed meat. Those were the two that raised it the most. The ones that, of course, lowered it the most would be the whole plant foods. Now, if you want to compare levels of, say, protein and cholesterol and fiber between a meat diet and a plant diet, the red circle around protein shows excessive protein, way too much, and excessive cholesterol, way too much, way over the limit. Protein, however, on a plant diet was just perfect, a little more than needed. And fiber was very good too, whereas fiber's a bit low on a typical meat diet. This, by the way, this graph that you see and many of the others here were made with a diet doctor. This is a dietary analysis tool that I created so that I could analyze diets and individual foods. I'll often just pop a food in there and see what is good and what is bad about it. In fact, I made a special button called the One Food button. So if you type in something like green beans and you click the One Food button, the program automatically gives you a full day's calories of just green beans and nothing else. So you can see what it's high in, what it's low in, what it's missing. Matter of fact, green beans are one of the most complete foods for humans that match our nutritional needs as well as any other food I've ever checked. Squash is quite good too. The Diet Doctor is available for you to use if you want to download it at drsteveblake.com, or you can also email me, steve@drsteveblake.com, if you'd like us to do nutritional analysis and then give you the results of that. Now, here's something interesting. Vitamin A is toxic in the high amounts, the preformed vitamin A. It's not toxic to carnivores and omnivores, but it is toxic to humans. Older folks shouldn't get more than 5,000 IUs per day, for example. Carnivores and omnivores can just detoxify the vitamin A, say, from an animal liver, but humans cannot detoxify it. On the flip side, beta carotene, showing here as a long molecule, we have the ability to snip that in half and get 2 molecules of retinol. So we can make our own retinol from beta carotene. Isn't that interesting? But carnivores and omnivores can't do that. Another concrete example of why we must be plant eaters, and there it is. Another of the books I've written, I was requested by McGraw-Hill to write a college textbook on vitamins and minerals, which I did. It's called Vitamins and Minerals Demystified. There's a link to buy it on my website, or you can just look on, this one's available on any bookseller, Barnes and Noble or whatever. This book tells you about all of the essential vitamins and minerals. This book is what all of the medical doctors should get in their training, or at least after their training, but do not. And I really wish that more people, especially health professionals, especially leading health professionals who lecture on diet, would read this book and know which vitamins and minerals we can make and which we can't, how much we need, what form, what foods, and all of that. Did you know that vitamin C is synthesized in all carnivore and omnivore livers, but humans cannot synthesize vitamin C? We have to get it. We've adapted to get it from our diet every day because we are plant eaters. It only occurs in plants, principally fruits. Some things that are called vegetables, like bell peppers, have a lot, but they're really seed-bearing fruits. If you look at this picture, you get an idea that fruit is our best source of vitamin C. American diet, very low in vitamin C. The RDA is 75 to 90. The optimal amount would be something like 400 to 1,000. Whole food plant diet, 355 milligrams of vitamin C is a nice boost for antioxidant activity, protective to the brain. Did you know that vitamin E can only protect a cell membrane one time unless it's recharged with vitamin C, and then it can go on to do it again. So it's crucial not only by itself, but to help our other antioxidants work. Again, the American diet had 10 milligrams of vitamin E. It's very low. We need a minimum of 15 milligrams per day, and more would be much better. The whole plant diet got 22 milligrams over the 15 per day. And then we often like to boost that with a real form of vitamin E. Unfortunately, it's extremely difficult to find a supplement that has real vitamin E. You will know by reading the label if it says RRR-alpha tocopherol that it is real. If it does not say that, it is not real. And in my book, Vitamins and Minerals Demystified, and many of my other books, I do talk about why the synthetic form of vitamin E is harmful, not helpful. Here is a book and a study that I wrote. The book is called Nutrients for Memory, the Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial. This is available on my website, drsteveblake.com. The trial is called, it's rather a long one, Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial, a randomized trial evaluating a multifaceted nutritional intervention to slow cognitive decline in mild cognitive impairment patients. This trial I designed and I ran with a really quite large team, and the results were fantastic. Simply by getting people to cut down on some of their worst intakes of saturated fat. Nobody went vegan on this diet, okay, but we got them better. And we gave them nutrients that they needed, real vitamin E, real vitamin C, and a lot of other nutrients. The people started out in this trial with a mini mental status exam number of 19 out of 30. Under 20 is considered dementia, so they were in the starting dementia zone. Between 20 and 25, then you're getting to the level at which is called mild cognitive impairment. From 25 to 30 is considered normal. So after 9 months, the average went from 19 to 29, normal. Isn't that fantastic? And you can, by looking in the book, you can do everything we did yourself. You don't need a trial. You don't need any fancy patented drugs. You don't need to pay me thousands of dollars. Just $9.95 to download the book. You also can get the study for free from the Journal of Brain Sciences, but it's a bit technical to read, as studies tend to be. Here's another example of antioxidants in a meat diet showing the vitamin A was too low from lack of carotenoids principally, and the vitamin E was too low, whereas the antioxidants on the plant diet, great. Vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E are all really, really good. Now here's a listing. If it's red, it means it's too low. Vitamin E was too low in all of these diets: Standard American, Atkins Zone, Paleo, Keto, South Beach, Transition Vegetarian with lots of cheese and white flour and eggs. And the Mediterranean diet, vitamin E was too low. McDougall diet was the worst because of the lack of any fats. Vitamin C, the only two vitamin E winners here were the vegan whole food diet and the raw vegan diet. And a vegan needs to be careful to get enough nuts and seeds to get his vitamin E or her vitamin E. Vitamin C was the worst in the Atkins diet, the best in the raw vegan diet, and varied. The transition vegetarian diet, not very good, and the McDougall diet was real bad. So the Atkins was the worst. The Standard American was very low. So it is important to get these antioxidants to protect the brain. And that's one of the things we used in the Hawaii Dementia Prevention. In the Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial, we got donated supplements. And people who weren't in the trial couldn't take them. So many people who heard about the great results encouraged me to make this brain and body food, which I did. You can get this on my website, drsteveblake.com. It's the only place you can get it. And it's rather a bother to have to make a supplement, but I can't find one that I would recommend. And I have looked and looked. And so I have to make it myself. I have made in a laboratory. It supplements all of those things I've talked about that people need on, I would say, almost any diet. But because humans, for instance, don't produce vitamin C, other mammals that do produce vitamin C make somewhere between 2,800 and 20,000 milligrams daily. And so it's really nice to get a boost of about 750 milligrams of vitamin C from this formula, this supplement. It has the real vitamin E, which is very, very rare, say. I take it. Now, here are two exciting studies that I just completed. The bottom one, reducing dietary advanced glycation end products to slow progression of cognitive decline in Alzheimer's disease. This came out in December and actually won awards for the most number of reads. Advanced glycation end products are formed when you barbecue, fry, or broil meat, chicken, fish, beef, pork, those things. It makes a tasty glaze on the top, but it also is extremely dangerous. It goes into the brain and damages the brain. It damages the arteries. It's really helpful to stay away from that. Now, you'll notice I say that only fried, barbecued, or broiled meat. However, if you went into a fast food restaurant or another restaurant and asked for boiled beef, I don't think they'd have. This is the way it is sold. This is the way it's prepared because that's the way people like it. And that's the way it's really dangerous. The other study on top, reducing dietary lipopolysaccharides to slow progression of cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease, we managed to get in the very prestigious journal Nutrients with extremely high price tag to get in there. It is also, both of these are open source, so you can read them for free, even though us authors have to pay a fortune to get them in there. Lipopolysaccharides are the leftover membranes of bacteria. Now, as I mentioned before, if you pick roadkill up and eat it, it has bacteria that will kill you. But if you cook it first, it kills the bacteria. You cook it at a high enough temperature for long enough. However, the leftover membranes known as lipopolysaccharides or endotoxins, is their easy name. These endotoxins are absorbed from food into the bloodstream and are the most inflammatory molecule that I have ever thought of. It takes 42 nanograms injected in a person to induce a huge increase of inflammation and actually start damaging memory and thinking ability. So I encourage you, if you're of a scholarly bent, to read these two papers. Advanced glycation end products result in these things called, I call them AGEs, but advanced glycation end products is their long name. They can generate 50 times as many free radical attacks compared to normal proteins. This is where they come from. Chicken, bacon, beef, chicken, chicken, beef, chicken, beef, chicken, turkey, you get the idea. Now, meats don't just contain these advanced glycation end products. They bioaccumulate organochlorine pesticides, terrible cancer producers, terrible for increasing the risk of neurodegenerative diseases, especially Parkinson's disease. Rancid oils. Harmine is something that increases tremors and essential tremors, something very common. And it's found in, well, also in beer, but also in a lot of these meat products. Arachidonic acid, I'll mention briefly in a minute, and endotoxins, I'm going to talk about some more. I mentioned oxysterols from excess cholesterol, which is found in most of these meat, pork, chicken, eggs. Excess saturated fat, I've mentioned, increasing the risk of heart attacks and strokes and many other diseases like diabetes. And they lack the anti-inflammatory content, these foods. So that's not good. Here is a graph that I wrote and is in one of my articles. And it shows the high advanced glycation end product diet factor alpha, a marker of high inflammation, zoomed up. C-reactive protein, another marker of inflammation, zoomed up. When they switched these people to a lower advanced glycation end product, not a great diet, but a lower one, the tumor necrosis factor alpha went down instead of up, and the C-reactive protein went down instead of up compared to the levels that they were eating, before the test. In other words, they're bad. I have this graph that is in my paper on advanced glycation end products. The top amount was found in bacon, 2 slices, butter, 2 tablespoons. Really high amounts of advanced glycation end products resulting in a huge increase in inflammation. And neuroinflammation is one of the real problems in cognition. Inflammation of the arteries is a big problem with heart disease and strokes. And inflammation in the joints is a big problem with osteoarthritis. Beef, tuna, cheese, mayonnaise had still a lot. The olive oil has a little bit, but green beans, apple, carrot, banana, no problem. Whole plant foods are safe. Here's my book, Arthritis Relief. I wrote this to help people understand the dietary associations with osteoarthritis and inflammation. We get inflammation from foods we are not genetically adapted to eat, and that can cause great pain and disability. And I can help a lot with that with arthritis relief if you're willing to adjust your diet. And I also talk about various ways you can do it, even if you're not willing to greatly adjust your diet. So reduce inflammation, pain, reduce disability, and that's going to be really good. If you know someone who needs this book, it's available only at drsteveblake.com. Under $10. Arachidonic acid is a fatty acid normally made in our bodies and all animal bodies. We make just enough to provide normal arterial tone, normal inflammation, and normal clotting. If additional arachidonic acid is taken, in other words, if we eat any animal fat at all, it can cause excess inflammation, pain, arterial constriction, and blood clotting. Here's a little graph. The omega-6 family turns into arachidonic acid. The omega-3 family turns into eicosapentaenoic acid. Most people know this by EPA and think of it as fish oil, but it is actually made in our bodies if we have sufficient of the plant-based omega-3, which is easily found in flaxseed meal and walnuts. We can get just the right amount and make enough EPA if we're well nourished. This shows that arachidonic acid can be made from oils with omega-6, excess omega-6. Turkey, chicken, eggs, and other animal fat have the arachidonic acid pre-made. And the lipoxygenase enzymes create pain and inflammation. However, if we take flax seeds, which have omega-3s, we can make our own EPA, and then the lipoxygenase enzymes make special leukotrienes that reduce pain and inflammation. So it's under our control to a certain extent which of these foods you're eating. So I did a little look to see how much DHA and EPA were in beef, Australian grass-fed, game meat, deer meat. Nope, none. Alpha-linolenic acid was extremely small, something like 1/10 of the amount needed per day or less. And even the other essential fatty acid, very low. However, lots of saturated fat and cholesterol. So it's really better to stay away from meat, poultry, and game meats. And I know people sometimes say grass-fed is okay. It's not. This is from Mayer et al. In the journal Lipid. I have a book that I wrote. It's a textbook called Fats and Oils Demystified, also under $10 on my website. And if you want to know all about fats and oils, you can even take the quizzes and exams and find out for yourself which are the saturated fatty acids, which ones are harmful, which ones are helpful. No saturated fat is necessary for humans. We only need 2 essential fatty acids. And I'll bet a lot of the nutrition experts at The Real Truth About Health would have a hard time even naming the 2 essential fatty acids, which are alpha-linolenic acid for the omega-3s and linoleic acid for the omega-6. Endotoxins or lipopolysaccharides, as I mentioned, are killed during the cooking of meat. The leftover parts trigger inflammation, incredible inflammation. Without eating these foods, inflammation reduces. This can help people. We're seeing people in the clinic who actually are thinking more clearly with better memory, dramatic results, because they're not eating animal products anymore, or at least just reducing them. 2 hours after a meal high in animal fat, inflammation is raised in the entire body. Endotoxins from the leftover cells of bacterial cells. Here is a little figure that I drew that describes how it works. If you eat these cheese and meat, for example, that have the endotoxins in them, what if you ate less? You would have less of this lipopolysaccharide in your plasma, less lipopolysaccharides binding protein, less plasma CD14. Now, the cluster differentiation 14 is the one that allows the lipopolysaccharides to go and attach to the toll-like receptor 4. And that activates nuclear factor kappa B, and that activates cytokines, highly inflammatory cytokines, such that in one study, they fed a test meal with a high amount of these lipopolysaccharides in it, and it raised the cytokines 65 times within 2 hours. Isn't that amazing? What was the test meal? You have to look down to the fine print. It was a thin crust pizza. With less cytokines, you have less neuroinflammation because cytokines go right up into the brain. And less neuroinflammation means better cognition. How long does it take? We've seen results in weeks to months. It really helps the brain. Which foods have a lot of this LPS or endotoxins? Now, noting that it only takes about 40 to 60 nanograms in order to trigger an inflammatory reaction in the body. How much does a serving of macaroni and cheese have? 2,200,000. Okay, noting that it takes about 50 nanograms to create a tremendous inflammation and interfere with thinking, what about minced turkey? 1,800,000. Cheese and onion rolls, 1,300,000. Minced pork, 1,100,000. And down the list with pork sausage rolls, turkey, hamburger patty, infant formula milk powder. Heartbreaking studies on infant formula milk powder having tremendous amounts of inflammatory lipopolysaccharides in them. Lobster, I couldn't find numbers for other fish, but lobster was quite high. Pork, spaghetti with bologna, minced beef and onion pie, skim milk and milk all have a lot of these. Now you may think, well, milk, 1 cup, only 12,000, but it only took 42 nanograms in one study to jack up those cytokines 60 times. They damage brain neurons. They're found in the bloodstream of people who eat meat, chicken, fish, or dairy products. In fact, they're found within an hour after eating it. Shown to induce an inflammatory reaction that activates microglia and irreversible damage to brain cells. Microglia are like the police force of the brain. They do a good job like a cop walking the beat, but I guess if you somehow gave too much amphetamine and a bunch of heavy artillery to a cop, that'd be like a activated microglia. They just start attacking healthy brain neurons. We'll pause for a moment. Okay, so another of my books, Parkinson's Disease, Dietary Regulation of Dopamine. This is perhaps my best-selling book because there are not a lot of good solutions drug-wise to Parkinson's. Certainly, levodopa works and is helpful. And sometimes people need brain surgery. But there are many ways to help with Parkinson's disease and many ways to avoid getting it in the first place. Again, this book is available on my website for under $10, drsteveblake.com. Inflammation from foods we're not genetically adapted to can damage and kill our brain cells. Now, I mentioned fiber briefly. Fiber is really important to reduce inflammation. 20 grams of fiber is not enough. That's what you might get on an American diet. Good day. It looks like it was, yeah, that's what it was. And a whole plant food diet, this one got 77 grams of fiber, which is perfect. Lots of pectins, gums, and mucilage, types of fibers that are soothing and very, very helpful for digestion. Perfect digestion. So, are we omnivores? Are we plant eaters? Are we carnivores? I hope that I've made it clear that we fit in down there with Mr. Gorilla and not so close to the dogs and tigers. I want to thank you very much for your patience in listening to this. And it's fun with all the animal pictures. And I hope that, if you are a meat eater, you won't be offended. It'll give you food for thought. If you've already switched over, then I hope that this will give you some validation that you can continue eating healthy.